Good evening, everyone. Council, welcome back, staff and everyone. So we're reconvening from our meeting earlier this afternoon, and we will continue with staff report, the award of tender for the Uptown Water Feature and Plaza improvements. Does anyone have any, yes? Okay, does anyone, do we need a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation? Sorry, Councillor Freeman will move it and Councillor Wright will second it. Are there any questions, staff of the, or sorry, are there any questions, Council, of the staff report? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Wright.
I just want to mention that obviously these are very important improvements that are happening to the square. But I'm just wondering if somebody on staff, I don't know if, Emily, are you here? Yeah. I just want to know if you might comment briefly on the greening strategies for the square overall. Thanks.
Hi, through you, Mayor. Yeah, it's a good question. So for this tender, it's the water feature. And then, yeah, there are other improvements noted for within the square. There's currently a shade structure tender. It's out for bidding right now. And then as part of that, the shade structure work, there will be some wooden like bench tops to help break up the concrete in the square, and then some additional tree planting kind of in the existing raised planters along the south sort of area of the square.
Any further questions, Councillor Wright or anyone from Council? I just had a question similar to Councillor Wright. I was wondering about like rainwater capture. Is there anything kind of built in with this just to capture rainwater to, you know, for the trees or the other plantings that's there and to also just prevent some of the runoff?
Through you, Mayor, to you. Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that I think is valuable to consider throughout the project. We do have an upcoming project about the Laurel Greenway feasibility study, which includes more of these longer term visions for the square, including some of the at-grade planting. So it might be worth kind of exploring at that time capturing rainwater in this way. But for this project, it's really it's just not part of the scope. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Great. Any other questions, anyone? Seeing none, thank you very much for the report. So we have a mover in Councillor Freeman and a seconder, Councillor Wright. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is speed management on residential streets, proposed 30-kilometer speed limit implementation plan. And we have Jenny Setterfield, if I'm saying that right. And I apologize, I'm forgetting your name, Bob Henderson. Sorry, I'm Bob Henderson here. Sorry, Bob, with a presentation. Thank you, Jenny and Bob.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor, members of council, staff, and public on this blustery evening. The purpose of this presentation is to respond to council's motion from June 2022 and provide a recommendation on the city's speed management on residential streets. The presentation will cover some of the background, the recommended option, the rationale behind it, and a proposed phased approach to implement. Bob Henderson, the Director of Transportation, and I will be available for questions afterwards. At the June 13, 2022 council meeting, staff presented two options. Option A, 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limits for all streets with 30-kilometer-an-hour school zones. And option B, 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limits on all streets, including school zones. Staff recommended option A at that time. However, staff were subsequently directed by council to implement option B, subject to a revised implementation plan to be approved at a later date. The revised plan would also include staff recommendations to implement 40-kilometer-an-hour on context-sensitive streets. In order to determine those context-sensitive streets, staff reviewed the Transportation Master Plan as well as Transportation Association of Canada's guidelines. These guidelines helped identify roadways that should either be changed to or remain as the posted speed of 40 or, in some cases, 50 kilometers an hour. The review resulted in 4 options as shown on this slide, where the difference in between is between minor and major collector roads. It should be noted that all options exclude all streets within designated industrial and commercial areas, such as Frobisher Drive. All of the 4 options utilize designated neighborhood areas as per the Highway Traffic Act to varying degrees. This allows staff to minimize the number of sign installations and costs that are associated. In this particular example, the designated neighborhood area is in the Westvale neighborhood, which is bordered by Herb Street, Fisher-Holman Road, University Avenue, and Ira Needles Boulevard. Option 1 is the baseline and considered 30 kilometer an hour speed limits for all streets within each designated neighborhood area. In this option, the city would be broken into approximately 40 neighborhood areas, resulting in about 585 signs located at every entry and exit street into each area. Option 2A would see the same installation of a designated 30 kilometer neighborhood area. However, Class 4 minor collector and Class 4 major collector roads within those neighborhoods would be posted at 40 kilometers an hour. All remaining streets within that neighborhood would remain at 30 kilometers an hour. School zones would be posted at 30 kilometers regardless of their classification. Option 2B is the same as 2A, but with major being 50 kilometers an hour and minor at 40. We note that for 2B, there are approximately 11 streets in the city that are classified as major collectors as per the Transportation Master Plan. Both options, 2A and 2B, would have similar number of designated areas, approximately 1,300 signs each, citywide, and this is because we would have to install speed limit signs to either delineate the 40 or the 50 within each neighborhood. The costs are also similar between options 2A and 2B at approximately $460,000. Option 3 was developed to address potential driver confusion associated with options 2A and 2B, where you may enter a designated area, such as 30 kilometers an hour, and a short distance away, the speed would change to 40 kilometers an hour, such as the case in Thorndale Road in Westvale. Option 3 would subdivide the neighborhoods into much smaller areas, and these areas would be bordered by minor or major collectors, arterial roads, or regional roads, depending on which area you are. This option would continue to implement 30 kilometer speed limits on all local roads or Class 5 roads and school zones, 40 kilometer speed limits on Class 4 minor, and 50 on Class 4 major. Option 3 results in approximately 3,300 signs, as most roads would require a speed limit sign, also making the cost approximately triple of that of 2A and 2B. Staff compared the social and economic impacts of each option under consideration. Impacts included costs, aesthetics, driver comprehension, and context or compliance. A weighting was assigned to each social and economic category. The scoring was based on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the least preferred, 5 being the most preferred. The results of this assessment suggests that option 2B would result in the greatest combined social and economic benefit to the city. Therefore, given council's direction and of the 4 options, staff are recommending option 2B, 30 kilometer an hour speed limits in designated neighborhoods, with Class 4 minors within those being posted at 40 and majors at 50. Option 2B maintains the integrity of the Transportation Master Plan and the Transportation Association of Canada's guiding principles for setting speed limits. while addressing the desire for lower speed limits within neighborhood areas. In conjunction with the bullets listed here, other municipal experiences, and the social and economic assessment, staff feel that this option would be the appropriate solution as part of the city's speed management program. Should the preferred option 2B be approved by council, it's anticipated that it could be completed in 4 phases over 4 years. The first phase would begin in the spring of 2023 and include only the school areas. Staff would monitor the effectiveness of each phase and report to council each year before proceeding to the next phase of implementation. This annual report would allow an opportunity to refine any subsequent phasing. We note that since council has recently approved 2 additional operational staff in the 2023 operating budget request B37, staff anticipate that the implementation of option 2B could potentially be consolidated into a shorter time frame. Staff are currently contemplating consolidating phases 1 and 2 in 2023. Funding would come from the approved 2020 capital budget for the TMP implementation sign replacement project. Any subsequent funding would be identified through the 2024 to 2026 capital budget process. Staff have developed a communication plan that will inform both residents and the schools of the changes. Communication will be through various methods, including our social media, our city webpage, direct emails, media releases, neighborhood associations, postcards to neighborhoods prior to each phase, newspapers, both online and in print, and static on-street signs that will notify residents when to expect their installation, similar to those that we have for our leaf collection program. This concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time tonight, and we would welcome any questions you have at this time.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Council, are there questions? Yep. Sorry, Councillor Vasek, go ahead.
Thank you. I have questions specifically on 2B. One of the concerns I've been hearing from people is the thought that if some streets are at 30, there's going to be road rage. So I'm curious if in your experience you've seen or heard of increased road rage or increased collisions by having neighborhood streets go to 30 kilometers an hour.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. We're going to have to draw on our experience of the pilot study that the city originally did, lowering speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour. And we did a 2-year assessment of collisions during that period, and we realized that there was no change in collisions as reported in this report. And we did not get any feedback in terms of road rage or experiences in that manner. But so we're drawing upon our experience with pilot projects.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. I mean, it also sounds like there was no major improvement, but there was no major risk in that regard anyways. And thinking about the design of the existing streets in Waterloo neighborhoods on class 4 and 5 roads, would you say that the streets that you're proposing for 30 and 40 are conducive to those potential posted speeds, and why or why not? I mean, obviously, yes, because you've done the work and you're proposing it, but I'm curious why they might be conducive to it.
Through you again, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. I'll try my best to answer this question. Based on our experience, we try to match up roadways based on context, and as recommended in this report, we're trying to apply a context-sensitive environment, so applying speeds that are appropriate for different types of roadways. So local roadways are generally very low speed, low volume environments, so that's the reason, hence why we're in this report recommending 30 kilometers per hour. On higher order streets, such as minor and major collectors, we feel that it's appropriate to match up the context of those environments with a 40 kilometer and a 50 kilometer hour speed environment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vasek. Over to Councillor Freeman.
I don't have a question, Mayor McCaig, but when it's appropriate, I'd like to put an alternative motion on the table.
Okay, thank you. We'll take questions until that point. Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McCabe, thank you very much, Jenny and Bob, for your presentation. It was very clear, and the report is very well done as well. I do have just two questions. Throughout the report, you talk about in any one of the options that there may be an increased requirement for traffic calming measures, and yet you didn't go into a little bit more about what you're thinking about that and what we might be anticipating.
Sure, thank you. So through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hanmer. The current traffic calming policy right now has a phase 1 and phase 2 criteria. Phase 1 criteria is based on speeds over, the operating speeds over, and the volume. The volume won't necessarily come into play for any one of these scenarios, but the speeds obviously will. So right now, if a posted speed is 50 kilometers an hour and the trigger for phase 1 traffic calming is 10 kilometers over, then you can see where right now we may have, a select number of streets that might meet that phase 1 criteria. If we reduce the speeds to 30 kilometers an hour, a majority of our streets to that, and then we in turn find out if the policy is kept the way it is, 10 kilometers over on operating, then we may, which we don't know right now, we may see quite a substantial increase in those streets being 10 kilometers over an operating speed, therefore meeting phase 1 criteria of our traffic calming policy. And so that in turn, the ripple effect down the line may put a very big strain on the system, on staff resources, and those within the community.
Thank you for expanding on that. So I would expect that we'll be seeing a new traffic calming policy coming forward at some point.
Through you, Mayor, yes, that is our anticipation that we would review that, the policy.
Thank you. Mayor, if I might, one more question. You had mentioned that with the implementation, because of the additional staff that have been allocated, phases 1 and 2 would be combined. Does that then follow that phases 3 and 4 would be combined in the following year, or will they still be a year apart?
Thank you for that question. That's a good question through you, Mayor, to the councillor. We have a robust communication plan that goes along with this, and so we need to take that into account as well. We want to make sure that the public know what's coming before it comes, and so I don't necessarily want to rush the implementation just to get the streets out faster. I want to make sure that everyone is aware of what's happening. So we'll have to take that all into account, but I would anticipate that we could maybe do half of the phase 3 with 2, or the next year, 3 and 4 together.
That sounds good, with a measured approach to getting the information of how each phase is going. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Sorry, if I may add to that too as well. And just to add on to Jenny's response there, I think it's important to know that we'll be coming back to council with progress reports. So that progress report after phase 1 will be a good opportunity to reflect back on that and consider the subsequent phases for consolidation.
I think we'll all look forward to the implementation reports. Thank you. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hamner. Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm just reading some of my notes here when I was reading into this report, as well as doing a little bit of research, and I'm seeing that the minimum speed reduction is roughly anticipated at 1 to 3 kilometers per hour if it's dropped to 30. So is it fair to say that we'd still be looking at close to 40 kilometers per hour?
Through you, Mayor, to the Councillor Rowe. That is, so what we've seen in our own pilot, when we reduced speeds from 50 to 40, we did see the 2 kilometers on average reduction. In other municipalities where they've reduced from 50 to 40, they only saw, 1 to 3 from that. But I've also seen when communities go from 50 to 30, there's still only the 1 to 3. And so depending on the road and the context of what the current operating speed is, like your current operating speed may already only be 45. And so you still may see a couple kilometers difference in that, but I think it would be all context sensitive, but it is on average about 1 to 3 regardless.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. And just one more question. And what I'm wondering about is if it is 30 kilometers per hour neighborhood-wide, including school zones, are there any concerns then, like any additional concerns about school zones, if that should be, is it still appropriate to be 30?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Rowe, that was one of our, in the report, one of the disadvantages of having a blanket 30 was that school zones were no longer distinguished or identifiable as a special vulnerable area. And so that would be a concern of ours, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councillor Wright?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just have a question about, in your slide deck, option 1 shows 2 schools within a bordered neighborhood. And this is not an option in Ward 7. Most of our school zones are separated by regional roads. And so there's a lot of children crossing pretty tricky school commutes. There are no boulevards on many of those streets, just because of the context of when Ward 7 was built and how the streets were designed in that era. And so with these bisected neighborhoods, the increased density, the frequency of road construction in these areas, has any thought been given to how this might particularly be applied in the Ward 7 context? It just seems like there's about 1,000 exceptions.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. Recognizing that we were tasked with coming up with a citywide plan, not a ward-specific plan, we felt it was very, very important to apply consistency throughout each ward. So recognizing that there might be individual streets in each ward that have unique circumstances, it was still recognized as a benefit overall to apply some consistency. That's not to say that we're happy to have a conversation about individual streets and have that conversation before we go and implement this in across the city and more specifically by ward.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Wright? No? Okay. Councillor Roach?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation. I believe on table 9 shows a cost estimate of close to $500,000, signs and posts and communication and labor. What would be the anticipated additional costs with the traffic calming measures that you had mentioned?
That's a very good question through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Roach. So we tried to apply an example in the report and apply some context. So for a recent traffic calming project, it cost the city approximately $500,000 to implement some speed humps, a raised intersection on 2 or 3 streets in the city. I wasn't around during that specific project, so I'm not particularly was involved in that, but that gives you an idea of the magnitude of one project, and you know, leveraging off what Jenny said in the past question, if there's an exacerbated amount of projects that require traffic calming now as a result of this change, $500,000 doesn't really go a long way to you know, do projects like what was done on Sundown. I think it was Sundown, or yeah, Sandown. Thank you. So, long story short, it would have a significant impact on our budgets and our resources.
So the $500,000 of signs and posts and labor, that's just the tip of the iceberg, correct? We're looking at millions of dollars?
The $400,000 approximately associated with option 2B is strictly signs, posted speed limits. So it is potentially a tip in the iceberg, as you put it, in terms of future responses to requests for traffic calming to get speeds down to a lowered speed limit or an operating speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob and Jenny.
Thank you, Councillor Roach. Any other questions? Just a couple questions myself from me then. What, in your opinion, do you think is the most effective way to manage vehicle speed?
Sure. That is,
Sorry, I should say driver speed. But
that is a silver bullet question. Thank you for that. The thing is there's not one answer and there's not one tool. The approach to road safety and vehicle speeds, it's a bunch of things, and this is just one. So this could be the start of our program. This is part of our program. We will be building up our program as well in years to come. And so driver behavior is one of those things where understanding why people drive the way they do and what engineering, education, enforcement, encouragement, those E's of traffic design come into play. And so we'll be putting in layers and layers for each area, depending on what is going on. Sometimes it's not a speed-related issue. Sometimes it's a sightline issue. Sometimes it's something else. And so for our job as road safety professionals, we look at what is the crux of the issue, and we try to nail down that to make sure that we're getting the right countermeasure.
Thank you. That's helpful. Just another question, just in terms of following along Councillor Roach's question about other traffic calming measures. What could you comment on the potential to use things besides just those boulevard or those posts that get screwed into and traffic, the speed bumps? Like, are there other ways that can be utilized that slow vehicles down or drivers down through communities that could also change some of the road design, but maybe add some beautification options so we're doing more than one thing at a time? Like, is that something that you're considering?
So thank you for the question through you, Mayor McCabe. As Jenny mentioned, it's just not one silver bullet. There's a number of initiatives that we try to employ and implement to reduce speeds. Like you mentioned, there's the speed signs in the middle of the road or on the edges of the road. But we find that the best way in terms of managing speed, and it's unfortunately not the most expeditious way to manage speed throughout the city, but reconstructing roads and redesigning roads so that they're narrower, adding vertical and horizontal deflection in roads is probably the best way in my experience. My 26 years of being in this field is found to be the most effective. But again, speed limits are a piece of that pie, and working with police and educating the public are all pieces of the pie. Research is being done continually on new methods to figure out how to slow down people. I think what we're finding is when the best way to change driver behavior is actually making a person feel uncomfortable, maybe the wrong words, but taking away the feeling that it's easy to drive very fast is really what I'm getting at. So changing the mindset of the driver.
Thank you. That's helpful. And just one last question, unless council had anything. So at the regional level, there's been the regional council and staff have been talking about automated speed cameras and some of the prior in community safety zones, which would be schools primarily, but we're looking at the definition of community safety zones. I'm just wondering if you can, maybe share with us how that might dovetail or fit in or help with the situation that we're trying to manage here in terms of road speed, driver speed.
Again, thank you for the question. So I had the luxury of helping project manage the deployment of automated speed enforcement alongside our city counterparts when I was with the region. But the program going forward, the way I see it, and working with the cities all together, that's working group, obviously making some of those decisions, but expanding it outside of school zones into community safety zones is a conversation that I've heard around the table with our counterparts at the region. And we're happy to work with them on managing that expansion. We're hopeful that we can expand the automated speed enforcement program. There are some limitations to that program, obviously, within the provincial court systems and within the Toronto Joint Municipal Processing Center. They can only manage so many tickets. But we're hoping that there's mechanisms in which we can expand that program for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Vasek.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor McCabe. Sorry, I've had this question for a little bit, but I haven't quite figured out how to formulate it. And it's just building on Councillor Roach's question, so I can have a better understanding. So last council term, staff recommended 40 kilometers an hour reduction. And it was my impression at that time that council was overwhelmingly, possibly unanimously, going to support 40 kilometers. In the end, we did 30 with the option B. So option A, it appeared that way, all council would approve. So I guess I'm curious, because I'm just getting this sense that there's the concern that the costs of changing the traffic calming policy and doing additional measures would be a prohibitive cost, something that as a community and taxpayers wouldn't be able to absorb if we went with option 2B here. But I just wanted to understand if we had last council term approved 40 kilometers an hour, would we expect to see the same or similar implementation costs through additional traffic calming requests as well?
Through you, Councillor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. We would still see an impact. It wouldn't be as much as if the speed limits were changed to 30 kilometers per hour, simply because the disparity between the posted speed limit and actual operating speeds would be less with the 40 kilometer hour speed limit.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying there would be, with 30, there would be more requests, because the Sandown Dunvegan, that's all 40 kilometers, and that's where the cost is based on. So I still see that there would be a large cost, which I was supportive of then, and I remain supportive of, given it's really about traffic safety and things like that. So regardless, we'd have more, but you're saying more with 30. Potentially, right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Just building on the question about the traffic calming pieces, we seem to be focusing on only one method of traffic calming. Can you share with us what else is included in the policy? Because not all of them are, the road reconstruction is not the only option that you use.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Hanmer. There are active and passive traffic calming measures. Active would be your speed humps, things like physical features. Passive could be things like the digital speed radar boards. It could be your community campaigns. It could be all those things where, what else? Almost this, not the softer side, but it's more of the, and now I might have lost for words. It's the different kind. It's kind of getting to more of the human behavior side rather than the physical force side. So there are lots of options in there.
Okay, thank you, because it is a full picture we need to look at. I recognize the road reconstruction is appropriate in some of our areas, but there may be other options that we can consider. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. My question is about when a road is due for reconstruction, regardless of traffic calming. So let's say in this situation, Thorndale here. What if Thorndale at some time in the next 10 years, and I don't know where it is on the capital budget, but at some point in time needs to be reconstructed because of its end of useful life? What role does the posted speed limit play in how we reconstruct that road?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. A really good example is Alexandra in front of Empire School. And so when Alexandra was up for reconstruction, transportation staff met with engineering and scoped out a totally different cross-section. So, we incorporated the school in our discussions as well. We talked about what needs they had. We reduced the pavement width. We looked at different parking options. We put in raised crosswalks. We have raised intersections. And then we put in a couple chicanes as well as it intersects with Westmount. And so the posted speed and the context sensitive area, this is a school area, and so we would do the same here at Thorndale, that would all be brought into the discussions when we scope the reconstruction. And we're starting to do that more with every single one that comes across our desk.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Bodley? No? Okay, Councillor Wright.
I have a follow-up on that one. Thank you, Mayor. So on the Alexandra example, so you actually, with Empire School, it was the side of the school that had the road reconstruction, correct? And that's where the kindergarten entrance is. And so how would that be affected by the posted speed limit with the options that are presented here? Like, would it remain a 40 because it's on the side of the school and not at the front entrance of the school?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright, it is the side. There is the side entrance. We would put that as a 30 kilometer on that side as well as Empire.
Okay, so it is possible to do wraparounds on schools, the school zone posting, like the 30 kilometer?
Yes, depending on where the entrance points are. The HTA speaks to access points. And so there would be an access point on Alexandra,
Okay,
and there is
'cause
an access point on Empire.
I noted that the same thing applied to Lourdes, which is on the other side of Westmount. But that's not the case for a lot of the schools where the schoolyard entrance, so where kids are actually coming in, is not designated an official entrance, but that is actually where kids are entering the schoolyard from their school commute. So is there flexibility to look at that more closely?
Yes, there is, through you, Mayor. We are looking at expanding our school areas to include, and as part of phase one, we have plans in place to extend some of those areas around the corner, but we do like to keep them adjacent to the actual school itself, and not include any of like a block away or walking at that point. So the 30K would be limited to directly adjacent to the school.
But you could still have a community safety zone where your fines might double in that zone around a school. Like, can you layer those different methods?
You could layer them. They couldn't overlap each other.
Yeah.
But you could designate separate areas. We still have to go through the process of a community safety zone definition, designation, criteria. We haven't done that yet. That's on our to-do list. So, but theoretically, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions, Council? Can I just what you just said about going through the definition of the community safety zone? I thought that was in provincial legislation.
We're doing a good job at this, though. A community safety zone is defined as in the HTA. However, it doesn't. It allows municipalities latitude to determine what criteria they use to come up with a community safety zone. So I mentioned that we're working with the region on expanding automated speed enforcement. And as part of that working group, we're hoping that the cities and the region can work collaboratively on coming up with that criteria so that we're all consistent region-wide.
Oh, thanks. That's interesting because we were asking about that at the region, and we were told that that it was like a legal definition that the province mandated the community safety zone. And so, yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's something that communities can have some input into and some context around, because that would certainly, that flexibility would be welcome, I think, at least from my perspective, and I think probably from some of our, well, it sounds like staff and council's perspective. So thank you for that. Councillor Rowe.
Last question for me, through you, Mayor. I actually just wondered if any of the speed limit recommendations incorporates first responders and how they are impacted.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Rowe. Within the Highway Traffic Act, they're actually exempt. That's not to say that they will exceed the speed limit. They try and do and respond to as safely and as efficiently as they can. But they are technically exempt from that. However, they have all supported the movement towards safer streets and safer roads.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Council? This is good questions from everyone. Thank you. So thank you very much, Jenny and Bob. We really appreciate it. So now we will, thanks for the presentation and the PowerPoint. It was really helpful, as were your answers. So now we have our delegation, Jason Thistlethwaite, the Uptown West Neighborhood Association. Thank you, Jason, for coming in on this very stormy night and representing the Uptown Neighborhood Association. You have 10 minutes, so the floor is yours.
Council, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to thank staff as well for working on the traffic speed reduction implementation plan that was agreed upon at last June's meeting. My name is Jason Thistlethwaite. I'm here today representing the board of the Uptown West Neighborhood Association. I'd like to provide some perspective on behalf of the Neighborhood Association regarding the speed management review. The presentation reflects a few perspectives from community members. We've had a few meetings in the spring and a lot of discussion throughout the summer. And then again, last week after the staff report came out, we sent that out to our mail list, which I found out last night has over 1,000 people on it. So, we had some feedback on the review. In our neighborhood, in particular Uptown West, there's a significant concern about the high speed of traffic. The neighborhood has a lot of seniors, children, and transit users who are concerned about their public safety. And it's for this reason that the Neighborhood Association consensus formed in favor of option 1 or 2B as outlined in the staff report. Residents believe these measures support this important goal of public safety that we mentioned. Why was there support for 30 kilometers an hour on local streets, on neighborhood streets in our neighborhood? Many of our neighbors wondered why 30, why not 40? What's the difference? Well, when it was explained that reduction from 40 to 30 actually represents a tangible improvement in public safety, they understood, and the position shifted to understanding why 30 kilometers is such an important goal. We do know, you've been over all this evidence, you've seen the science behind it, that there's a much better chance of surviving an interaction with a moving car at 30 kilometers an hour as opposed to 40. A few others pointed out it's not about what necessarily the sign says, it's what the behavior that the sign encourages. And so really, if at 40 kilometers an hour, and we know from the staff report that cars are not going to travel at 40 kilometers an hour, they're going to be traveling at 50, they're going to be traveling at 60. And extreme speed was a big concern among people in our neighborhood. It doesn't matter how good of a driver you are when you're going at 40, 45 kilometer hours plus. Your reaction and braking time is not going to be enough to stop before the first two children you see in the image on the slide. So a reduction of 30 kilometers an hour got support as a means of convincing drivers that, whoa, this is a neighborhood where we're expecting people to pay much more attention to the roads than if the case was 40. So the difference between driving 60 in a 40 zone versus 60 in a 30 zone, we believe is enough to change and influence driver behavior. And we know it works, right? Several residents have argued that Waterloo signed up and adopted Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a strategy, but without action, that's just words on a paper. Reducing speed limits is evidence of actually implementing that strategy. We know this because those communities and jurisdictions that have adopted 30 kilometers an hour have seen a reduction in casualties and dangerous interactions with traffic. And it's why you're likely to see a lot more municipalities in the future make the exact same type of decision. The other reason why neighbors, and a few other reasons why neighbors supported the idea, is that it advances a whole other series of policy objectives. So from a policy want perspective, you're going to check a lot of boxes with the 30 kilometers an hour. It helps advance the city's commitment to transform WR by encouraging active transportation. Pedestrians, especially in areas with adequate transit, need to feel safe, want to feel safe. And of course, reducing speed limits helps achieve the city's strategic plan, which calls for safe, sustainable, and equitable transportation. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the additional benefits, including reducing noise and air pollution. This came up among a lot of neighbors who are frustrated about loud car noises at night and air pollution. So the 30 kilometers an hour isn't just a reduction to 30 kilometers an hour. It does check a few more boxes in your policy portfolio. Many residents are aware that there is opposition to a reduction in speed limits, and we're sure you are hearing it in your inboxes. But many raise the point that 30 kilometers an hour, we were aware of it during the last election, and it was important to note that the opponents of the measure, including the candidate for mayor, lost. In our neighborhood, reducing speed limits was a major source of motivation to vote, and indeed, turnout was highest in the city, in part as a result of this. And finally, several residents offered some perspectives against this argument that we hear time and time again, that reducing speed limits using signs without enforcement or better road design is sort of limited as a strategy. It's not as effective as other strategies. And we had a few people comment on this, more or less arguing that something is effectively better than nothing at this point. So they're happy to see 30 kilometers an hour for local roads on the staff report endorsed in all four of the scenarios. Others argued, saying, look, this is a problem in our neighborhood and you have to start with something. You have to start somewhere. If we can't get the little things right, why should we expect the city to get the big things right? Changing the signs is the most basic thing we can do to protect my family's safety, according to a couple people enforce that point. And on this issue around, well, why even bother doing it if we can't enforce it? We do this all the time. You can't enforce the laws around tax evasion, but it doesn't mean you don't try and stop tax evasion. So that just summarizes a bit of the points that came through our discussions with our neighborhood. I'm very grateful to live in the neighborhood. It's very active and a lot of people have a lot to say about this. So I hope I did some justice to those perspectives today. Thank you much for the opportunity to speak, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think you did your neighborhood proud, so thanks very much for taking the time and wading through our questions. So Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Jason, I'm just wondering about one of your slides, back a few, you have the Brussels image. And is that because there's like a 2020 Stockholm Declaration on reducing speed limits globally? It was like and then it was ratified by UN General Assembly?
I don't know why whether that's either way, happy Brussels did it.
Okay, well, I think it is in the context. I mean, they obviously did it before the Stockholm Declaration, but I'm wondering whether this points to there just being kind of a leading curve on 30 kilometers an hour, and whether we're just going to end up revisiting this a few years down the road if we're deciding not to be along that leading curve at this point. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is what's absolutely going to happen. The requirements around density are just growing and growing and growing. So you're going to get more and more people in urban places. Canada's already very urban as a country. So yeah, this is a when councilors using tip of the iceberg, this is the tip of the iceberg for municipalities adopting this policy. Municipalities like what other municipalities do, and as soon as we start seeing some of them do it, the pressure to do this will increase. So I absolutely do think you're getting ahead of the game and potentially doing it at a time that's going to be cheaper than if you kick it down the road 4 or 5 years.
Just a quick follow-up question. Actually, this might be more to staff, but do we have an idea of how many other Canadian cities are pursuing the 30 kilometers? Like, we know Toronto is doing it.
I'll look to Jenny or Bob or, I don't know, Ron, if you wanted to take that.
I wish I had a survey of municipalities across Canada that are doing this, but I know there's a number of municipalities considering or have already implemented 30. There's a variety of different implementation plans. Some are doing it in small pockets like Edmonton. The City of Toronto is taking they applied a 30K speed limit to neighborhoods that were conducive to a 30K speed limit. I'm not sure if that is widespread throughout the city, but I know they started and are expanding. But I wish I had a great answer for you. There's varying different plans going on throughout Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Any other questions, council, to the delegate? Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Thistlethwaite, and thank you through you to your neighborhood association for the time they've taken to work on that, to work on the PowerPoint and your presentation, and we appreciate you sharing your thoughts. So the other delegate is not here, so that concludes the delegates on this particular topic. So, council, we have the staff recommendation in front of us. Do we have Councillor Freeman, you said you had an alternative motion.
Yeah, through you, Mayor McCabe, I'd like to put an alternative motion on the table if I could. I'd like to speak to it if possible. Would you like me to read this so that it's in the record for people listening online, or?
Sure. We should get a seconder before you speak to it, though. Councillor Hamner.
Okay. The clerk tells me that it's up on the screen and that I don't need to read it.
Okay. Yeah. So moved by Councillor Freeman and seconded by Councillor Hamner. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this motion effectively will ask council to reconsider the motion that came to council back in June of last year, which would see the road set at 40 kilometers an hour throughout the neighborhoods with a reduced speed of 30 around all school zones. And if I understand the question and answer correctly, that could include the additional wraparound school zones as was discussed by Councillor Wright. May I get confirmation on that?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, that is correct.
Okay. So here's my rationale. When this first came to council, I agreed with 30 kilometers per hour, not because I thought it was enforceable, and I think that's really important to put on the table. I agreed with 30 kilometers an hour because the research that I had done said that 30 kilometers an hour was a real psychology tool, and it seemed like the cheapest bang for our buck as it related to traffic calming. Because it's very true what the delegate said, that Canadians are very comfortable driving 20 kilometers over the speed limit. So if you set it at 30, you might get people driving 50, which would be a win compared to the fact that they're currently driving about 70. And so in my mind's eye, that's why I voted for 30. And that is the documentation that I'd seen in Toronto as well around their Vision Zero and why they were implementing 30 in neighborhood zones. This is the singular issue in 20 years of serving on council for which I have received inordinate amounts of emails, stopped in hallways, phone calls, and everything. And what people have told me is that they want to be able to try to adhere to the speed limit. And that with great confidence, they do not believe they'll be willing to drive 30. but they would like to drive 40. I even had an individual in tears on the phone saying, what kind of an example am I setting to my children if I permanently drive 40 in a zone that's posted 30? Because I think 30 is too low. In addition to that, this staff report was particularly well prepared, and I'd like to thank you for that, from a technical perspective, because the first report did not address any of my questions that I had around the technical research that was more broadly available in the transportation realm, primarily within North America. So there's no question in Europe. When I was in Europe, there was no question that people said, sign the roads 30. In Europe, as most people know, people park their cars on both sides of the street, bumper to bumper, that you can't even really get between cars in Europe. And so the vehicles parked on the street form almost an impenetrable barrier to people crossing the road. And when cars are parked bumper to bumper on the road, as Mr. Henderson said earlier, that reduces travel lanes. And when travel lanes are reduced, it draws the driver's eye down and they feel less comfortable driving speeds in excess of 40 or 50 kilometers an hour, quite simply because they can't. The roads are very narrow, and to be able to traverse those roads safely, it forces the speed limits down. We don't have that situation in North America yet. Maybe we will someday. And so by signing at 30, it forces another entirely different amount of money and conversation as it relates to traffic calming. Because we know we can't rely on enforcement. Police don't have the resources to do the current enforcement, so they're not going to have the resources to do enforcement at 30. And I also found this report incredibly telling as it relates to the fact that in North America, the experience has been that people have reduced speed by 1 to 2 kilometers. So if people are telling me that they would like the speeds to be 40, that they would like an opportunity to try to drive 40, that the conversations that we've had more broadly in the community around this issue has really raised awareness around traffic speeds, and that people would like to be given the opportunity at speed that they think they can adhere to. I would like to go with 40 and 30 in the school zones. The maps that were shown in terms of what I'm going to call sign blight, I thought were also incredibly telling, and how confusing that they will get in road systems where you've got a 40 collector, like in my case, it would be like Chesapeake, and then you'd have all these shoot-offs of 30. So you'd have all these signs all over the place, 40 here, 30 there. But more importantly, we're putting the poles in once. It's the cost of putting the poles in the ground and doing all the locates that costs this money. So if we decide in 5 years' time that those signs should be changed to 30, it's not another $500,000 cost, because the big cost of putting the poles in the ground is done. We're just reprinting signs. So at this point, I feel very strongly that I have heard from the community. When I knocked on doors, people stopped me throughout the city, not just in my ward. They stopped me in the mall. They stopped me uptown when they saw me at Lumen events and so on. This was the number one thing they came and spoke with me about. And I spoke with everyone. I phoned everyone back. I told them my whole rationale around 30 and this whole notion of this psychology piece and everything. And people said, I don't want my government to overregulate me and tell me that I have to drive 30 because I'm not gonna. So give me something that I can at least try to drive. So that's what I've heard. That's what this motion is effectively seeking to do. I appreciate commentary and debate on it, of course, and I thank you for the opportunity to unpack my rationale. And I'll then turn this back to Mayor McCabe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Freeman. So are there other comments, questions? Councillor Bodley, I don't know why I want to call you Councillor Roach tonight, and then Councillor Hamner.
Thank you, through Mayor McCabe. Well, I appreciate Councillor Freeman putting this motion forward and having the chance to rediscuss this, particularly in front of a new council. But I will present the opposing view, I guess, for lack of a better word. First, I just want to speak to there's been a lot of discussion here around cost, and today, essentially saying that signing it at 30 is going to require more traffic calming, which requires more cost. I don't think at council we should be suggesting that illuminating a problem, i.e. cars driving too fast in our neighborhood, which necessitates more traffic calming, is the same thing as spending money. And moreover, when we are signing the roads at 30, or certain roads at 40 in this situation here, I believe we're spending the cost once to justify that speed limit when we get that most bang for our buck, as Mr. Henderson talked about, which is when the roads are being redesigned. But I'm going to go back to, it was nearly 2 years ago when I went out with my daughter and filmed some videos where I basically was asking myself, what is the difference between driving 40 and driving 30? What is the furthest possible distance it could be in each of my neighborhoods, and what would it add to my commute? So in Vista Hills, the distance was 40 seconds. Less now based on recommended 2B, but it was 40 seconds. That's the most difference between 40 and 30. So what streets are we talking about, and what streets are we not talking about? Like in Ward 2, we're not talking about Columbia. We're not talking about Fisher-Holman or Herbsville. We're not even talking about Laurelwood anymore. We're talking about the first little bit in your own neighborhood and the last little bit of your drive through someone else's neighborhood. These are the streets where children and seniors are walking, where there are less official crossings. These are the place where our kids run across the street to the park, yes, to their schools, but also to their friend's house. In Laurel Creek, the difference was 30 seconds. Again, less now. So the question is why? Why 30? As Mr. Thistlethwaite referenced, it works. That's one piece. But the other piece is it's the standard. The global standard that emerged from the Global Ministerial Road Safety Conference in 2020 is that local streets should be posted at 30 kilometers an hour. Since Council began discussing this issue over 2 years ago, we are seeing more and more places, not just in Europe, but around the world, implementing 30 kilometer an hour zones, particularly cities that are committing to Vision Zero like we are. They see this as part, not all, but part of the solution. Minneapolis, Seattle, Portland in the US. I won't even reference the Europe ones, but Paris recently, all of Paris, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Banff, all of them have either implemented this across the city or in a host of zones and are rolling it out over time. In Columbia Forest, the difference was 13 seconds. And even since Council's decision last year, there has been more and more studies that have come out from this. In Brussels, there was a 20% drop in the number of accidents, 25% drop in serious injuries and death. According to their data, visible and steady drops in speeds with average speeds stabilizing at lower levels. Traffic noise halved in some cases. In Edinburgh, they did a study and casualties dropped 39%. And they also found that there was an increase in support over time for the change and that most people were following the new rules. It is clear that while it is not the silver bullet to all of our traffic safety concerns, lowering speed limits is a proven piece of the puzzle, which, as I said, crucially can also be the catalyst for changes in our road design. In Laurelwood, the difference was 15 seconds. Like all of us around the horseshoe today, during the campaign, yes, I definitely heard from frustrated folks. I counted them, it was about 25 people. I listened intently to those people as I knocked on doors and engaged in lengthy conversations with each of those folks. In general, those folks were under the impression that this was going to impact every street in Waterloo. People read the headline. When clearly explaining the streets that would be impacted, the majority of the folks that I talked to either changed their minds or at least came away with a broader respect for where the decision was coming from. And the remaining minority of folks who were opposed still were people who did not want to see us tackle this issue and felt like traffic calming should not be a focus for council, that we should leave the speed limit where it is. In choosing 30, it's more important to note who we are listening to. Countless residents, that are requesting traffic calming interventions all over the city. This is the number one issue that we hear about on council and has been for a very long time. Parent councils who have created safe travel committees in their schools, working diligently to improve pickup and drop off and encourage more cycling and walking, who have done the analysis that reveals the catch-22, that parents drive their kids to school because they don't feel safe letting them walk, and then unfortunately becoming part of the problem themselves. Our key partners, Student Transportation Services, Waterloo Region, who wrote to council in the previous report, students do not just walk or cycle in the couple hundred meters in front of or around the school. They walk 1 kilometer or more, and it is necessary for the whole trip to be safe. And while there were frustrated residents, in the position that I was in, received a lot of supportive feedback at the door. And I just want to tell one quick story. I was on Violet Street in Laurel Creek. It was very late at night, 7:30 or so, very dark. And I spoke to a family. I knocked on the door. It was a woman and her small children. And they were permanent residents, so they tried to stop me, which is, I think, a technique people use when they don't want to talk to anybody. But they tried to talk to me, tried to get me to move along. I talked to them for a little bit about how important the work is that we do at City Council on a variety of issues. We had a nice conversation, and I walked on to the next door. And a couple of minutes later, I had a gentleman run down the street at me and stop me. And he stopped me 2 houses down from there, and he said, "You're Royce? And I just want to shake your hand for fighting to make our streets safer for my little kids. I want them to be able to walk to school, and I don't feel comfortable right now. Thank you for doing what you're doing." In Clare Hills, the difference is 23 seconds. And so tonight, I'm just going to ask council the same thing that I asked my constituents 2 years ago. Is 23 seconds added to your commute worth having a safer transportation network? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bodley. Just a quick note, I let the first 2 people speak, but we were well over 5 minutes each. So we welcome the conversation and the discussion, but maybe just keep your comments a little more concise if we can. Councillor Hamner, and then we'll go to Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor McCabe. Through you, I am very supportive of and happy to have seconded this particular motion. In the spring, when we were dealing with this issue, street safety was certainly a concern throughout my ward, and for the study that we saw, many people were with 40 kilometers per hour and 30 in the school zones. I heard that resoundingly throughout the campaign, and again as we were preparing for today's meeting. There needs to be a demarcation around the school zones to make them safe. I am happy to hear that we can use the wraparound for the schools, even though, Councillor Wright, the 2 that you pointed for me, there are other points of access to both of those schools, which would benefit from having that wraparound approach. The bigger thing that I kept hearing was the compliance. Like Councillor Freeman, people want to be able to drive the speed limit that is posted. And the feeling is that 40 or that 30 is too slow all the way around. So it may be a stopgap measure or a stepped approach or a measured approach to us improving our streets. But to me, if we can get compliance at 40 and 30 around the school zones, I think we've made major strides. And if we need to go that next step, we've got a lot in place to be able to do that. So I'm happy to support the motion as it's been amended.
Thank you, Councillor Hamner and Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I actually have a question for staff on part 2 here of this alternate motion. The example for 50 kilometers an hour on class 4 major collectors, from the maps that I was looking at, it makes it look like Park Street in this scenario would remain at 50 kilometers an hour. Are you able to confirm that?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Wright. If it's classified as per the Transportation Master Plan as a major collector, right at this moment, yes, it would remain at 50 kilometers an hour. However, as Bob indicated earlier, before we go through each phase and implementation, we would have discussions about potentially looking at individuals. We do want to remind, they are classified for certain reasons. It's based on the function of their road. And major collectors are such those that they do have a purpose to carry a lot more traffic and collecting from the neighborhoods. But it's not to say that we couldn't review it, but potentially when we get to that point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that road in particular, because it used to have 2 schools adjacent to it, and both have been decommissioned, and yet the same neighborhood composition exists, and the density is increasing incredibly along that corridor, and it really needs support in terms of enabling safer crossings. So it would definitely, that section between Union and William would need reclassification given this scenario. And I can think of a handful more streets in Uptown where some sort of reclassification or special designation would need to be considered, just because there are so many exceptions to the rule in Uptown.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Or sorry, did you have a response to that, or?
I did, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so as part of the official plan update and the upcoming transportation master plan, that's when we look at the holistically of the entire city, when we go through reclassification, a reclassification exercise. And so in the transportation master plan update, the streets were reviewed at that time. But I will refer to our commissioner for further comment.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright, and it is an excellent question, Councillor Wright, to build on what Jenny has indicated. I think it's also important for Council to remember, and I know you do, that on an annual basis we do traffic counts. We look at collision data at specific areas. Before there are new developments, we carefully review traffic studies that have to be submitted. In some cases, if we don't like the traffic studies that are submitted by the developers, we'll actually do a peer review on it. So locations like Park Street, which is a good example, in and above this staff report before council tonight, we would look at such streets on a routine basis as well. So just to provide a little context, that as part of the Transportations Division's annual work plan, we do look at the functioning of streets regardless of the posted speed limit.
Thank you, Ron and Jenny, for that. Did you have a follow-up or no? Okay, Councillor Vasic.
Okay, thanks through you, Mayor. I won't be supporting the revised motion, though I appreciate the passion and arguments behind it. If given the chance, I will support 2B as proposed by staff, and here's my reasons. If they're compelling to you, great. I think staff have done a good job of stepping it, so the 30, 40, 50, which attends to some of the concerns on compliance. Now, people don't comply now, and I think we all know that this isn't going to lead to compliance whether we go to 40 or 30. And that people, the point of this is to change the culture of driving culture. And we will see a slight reduction, 1 to 3 kilometers per hour, potentially if we go to 30, which isn't much different than if we go to 40. But over time, and I'm sorry to use already a strategic planning word, but if we want to be future ready, then we can start now changing the culture rather than changing the culture now for 40 kilometers and then we have to do it again. And then people get this hit twice with having to change from 40 now, which many people are going to find an adjustment anyways. Less so maybe because we're having the 30 kilometer conversation, but I think that's why maybe people are saying they'd be more comfortable with 40. So to say, I think the stepped solution is a good one for beginning to change the culture in a measured way that attends to the context of Waterloo specifically. 30 is just safer. If we were to go 30, fewer people will die, fewer motorists will be hit. The data was there. And the other one I wanted to talk about was the Edinburgh study, which said that they improved the quality of life for some people who participated in that study. And I think that's important. And very anecdotally, I also drove around when no one was around me on a small street at 35. 30 is slow, so I drove at 35. And it was Halloween, it was a holiday, and I took in the decorations. I made eye contact and waved at people. And I was so present in my little drive between intersections that I felt stronger in place and more connected in that very small drive. And I think that if we all had those experiences rather than rush, so I believe that the quality of life improved in Edinburgh, and I think it can here too. Two last points is one, I also talked about this with people in the election, but I stood firm on it, and I had great conversations, and it was the election issue in my ward, and it got kind of nasty towards me, and not too bad, but a little bit. And so it was pretty intense, but I had great conversations, and people were like, oh, 30, that seems like a lot. And I was like, I know, I agree. But here's why I think it's the right decision. And we had really great conversations, and there were only, I don't know, I guess 35% of people who really felt that strongly about it. And so the other thing I just want to caution, and this is my last point, is I really don't want this debate to turn into a government overreach debate. And I have extreme concerns about that, because we are in a time of major divisiveness, and I don't think that the safety of the community, an issue people have been talking to us about for a very long time, is government overreach. We might say the same things about having to have grass on our lawn cut to a certain height, or not being able to park on the public roads or on the apron of our driveway. There's all sorts of things that we have in our bylaws that we require of residents who live in the city. So I just want to be mindful that that's a bit of a slippery slope to take one of the most major issues that have come to us as a council, last council, and again during the election, to say that attending to that, even if it might be a bit of a controversial issue, is in any way government overreach. So I just wanted to drop that into the conversation. Thanks. Probably more than 5 minutes. Well, let me, no, I'm just joking.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vasek. And we'll go next to Councillor Roach.
Thank you. I'll only take 1 minute and 16 seconds. And through you, Mayor, I would like to say that I'd like to support Councillor Freeman's amended motion. Aside from the costs and the blank check that we're writing, that we will be doing our calming, I'm brand new to council. Councillor Freeman's been here for 20 years, and there's incumbents here. But when I campaigned, I said to my constituents that I would be their voice. And I'm not going to pretend I know more than they do. And by far, my constituents are against the 30-kilometer reduction. We did it, and I'm not just talking about the 20 people the doors that I knocked on or that mentioned to me. We went through an engagement of Waterloo, and our constituents told us what they wanted. And the one thing that really resonates with me when I knocked on doors is we find that our council doesn't listen to us. They know better than we know. And I'm here to be their voice, and I will not be supporting the 30-kilometer motion. Thank you.
Believe it or not, you were 1 minute and 16 seconds. I am not joking. Okay, any other comments, questions on this? Oh, sorry. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. I also do support this motion for the 40 kilometers, and it is, Hans has summarized what my experience on the campaign trail, that I had overwhelming feedback against the 30 kilometers. And I hear what Councillor Bodley is saying and Councillor Bassick about safety, and that is a priority. I also hear what Councillor Freeman is saying, and what is just as Councillor Bassick was talking about the stepped approach, and that if 30 kilometers is something that municipalities are heading towards, I'm more of a cautious nature, and I see a 40 as a step towards that. And if we need to move to 30, then that is something that we can consider while the signs are in place, and that is somewhere that we can go. At this moment, listening to my constituents and also my own concerns about school zones not being emphasized, additional future costs as well, and also what the constituents are saying is that there won't be compliance. And the 1 to 3 kilometers reduction, it has been something for me to consider strongly. So I will be supporting Councillor Freeman's motion, but I am open to the future and moving towards the 30 kilometers as things change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rowe. Last call for questions. Okay, we will. We have a motion in front of us, or the alternative motion. So we will move. We have a mover in Councillor Freeman and a seconder in Councillor Hamner. I'll call for the vote. Who is in favor of this motion? We have Councillor Rowe, Councillor Roach, Councillor Hamner, and Councillor Freeman. Who is contra this this motion? So we have Councillor Bassick, Councillor Wright, Councillor Bodley, and myself. So a tie vote fails. So we will revert back to the original motion, which was the staff recommendation. Do you want to pull that back up? Or do we, I guess we have it in our package. Do we have any further comments or discussion on the staff recommendation that is now before us? Yes, Councillor Freeman.
Just for clarity, if this motion falls, meaning a split vote, then that means that it's a do nothing option, which is that it stays status quo. Is that correct?
I will turn to the clerk for that, but I believe so.
Through the chair to Councillor Freeman, you don't currently have a motion on the floor, so you would require a mover and a seconder first. And then if a vote is called and then that fails, correct, we're still in a status quo. There would still be, likely staff would report back to council on some additional information, or an alternate motion could be considered this evening.
Thank you, clerk. I would say just on if this next motion fails, I think I'd hear staff's hearts breaking maybe, because this has been a 2 or 3 year process, and I think it's important to make a decision and go forward whichever way that's going to be, so that staff have clarity and we are in a position to give them that clarity for the staff and for the community. So we do have a staff recommendation. Is someone prepared to move that? Councillor Bodley, Councillor Bassick is seconding it. Any comments, questions? No further comment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. Just speaking to the option that is before us to be, personally, I believe that this is sort of the compromise that I was anticipating or hoping that staff would come back with when the alternative motion from the previous council was put forward. I believe that this is a compromise and measured approach. It is doing the step sort of procedure that people have asked, or that Councillor Bassick referenced. And I want to highlight from that engagement report that came out, it was 30% of folks who had said that 30 kilometers an hour was their preference, 40% who said 40, and 35% who said, 5% who said either 30 or 40. Very close in the community, but overwhelming that 75% of the community wanted to see us lowering the speed limits. And so I endorse this option. I think that it gives us the ability to make more progressive or bold changes to 30 in some streets where appropriate or over time as compliance increases, but it gets us down the path of where we would like to go when it comes to traffic calming on our local streets. So that's why I'm supporting option 2B.
Sorry, Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, I'm just going to signal my turns. I can't support this motion. This is not what I heard people tell me. And their voice was very, very loud and clear. You know, I appreciate the comments that were made earlier about the mayoral race, but it was a very close mayoral race, and almost 50% of people did want to see the speed limit change too. So I don't think that was an appropriate comment to make about people who put their name honestly on a ballot. If this motion were to fail, then I would like to move a motion to give direction to staff to consider ward-specific speed limits, because this is not going to work in my ward, and I know that, and I can't support it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I'm just trying to, there. Other comments, questions? Councillor, did you have your hand up, Councillor, right? Or was
Just that I have an alternative motion when the time is right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Hamner.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I too cannot support this motion. It's not what I was hearing prior to the election, during the election, and since we've been preparing for this. One of my major concerns with this, it doesn't have a demarcation for the school zones opposed to the local streets, and that is an issue in my ward.
Is that an amendment you could make to this motion that would satisfy you, or?
No, no, because the local streets are 30 and the school zones are 30.
Okay.
So no.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Oops, sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Roach.
Just again, not supporting this motion. I think it's once again, it is a case of council not listening to the people of Waterloo. Thank you.
Okay, so any final questions before we call the vote on this? Just brief comments from me. I would say that you know, the time that I've been in the mayor's chair, but certainly before that as a resident here, we know members on kind of both sides, if we can put it that way, of this issue have commented that speeding is the number one issue that council hears about, that staff hear about on a regular basis. And someone told me that when Mayor Lynn Wollstonecroft was the mayor, that's over 20 years ago, that was her number one issue as well. So this has been a long-standing issue in our community. So I think, with all due respect, Councillor Roach, I think we are listening to our community because we are responding to people who are telling us this is an issue, this is an ongoing issue, and that we really need to deal with it. And during the campaign, when people asked me about it, I said, well, look, this is the number one issue, and council is actually, to their credit, really trying to do something about it. So, you know, why are you sort of, in some cases, so upset about this? To which they didn't really have an answer, because, I mean, I think, like, you can't, there's no disputing that this really is the number one issue. And I think for lots of reasons that the delegate outlined, and certainly Councillor Roach or Councillor Bodley has outlined, they're very compelling reasons why the program that the city is looking to put together to address road safety and to address reducing driver speed, this is one of the steps in that process. And I think it's worth taking on behalf of just ensuring, doing what we can as council and as staff to make sure that our community is as safe as possible, particularly for more vulnerable road users and, you know, children, particularly trying to get to and from school safely. So, and I think we also just said in our strategic planning session that we want to be bold and we want to be future ready. And I think this is one way to do that. So, sorry, I apologize. I didn't start the timer. I wasn't realizing I was going to talk that long. Councillor Roach.
Yeah, just through you, Mayor, just because you mentioned my name in your little speech. I agree with you. We are listening to the community, but we're not listening to the majority of the community who took the time during the engagement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So any other yes.
Mayor, since it was asked at one point during the discussion what would happen if this motion failed, if it's helpful for council, we can pull up the resolution that was approved in 2022, which is the status quo that would exist if this motion fails. And an alternate motion is not proposed. So if that's helpful for people to have that in front of them so that they...
I would note, sure, you can pull it up. I think that might be helpful, but Councillor Wright had indicated that she has an alternative should the current motion fail. So this is the motion that was passed?
This is what exists for staff's purposes. This is what exists currently for implementation. So anything that happens this evening, if you want it to be different than this, has to encompass all of this, not just components of it. So if there's any alternate motions, it would have to all encompass change this resolution. Otherwise, this is the direction that staff have. So I just want to be clear when everyone is voting so that they understand, and any other potential alternate motions that come forward, it would have to fully encompass these elements.
Okay, does council have any questions about what the clerk just shared? No? Okay, Councillor Roach, or Roy. Oh my gosh,
Through
I'm
you,
sorry.
Mayor. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. So if both motions fail, this is what is going to move forward.
Through the chair to Councillor Rowe, that is correct. If both motions fail, this is the direction that staff have been given to implement. And so the next step for staff would be to report back again on an implementation plan, because that's the decision of council. So if your wish is to do something different, then we need a motion that encompasses that. And I think Ron, I notice, is signaling.
Yeah, through you, Mayor McCabe, and I thank Julie for procedural comments here. Looking back in history, if we remember, council actually approved the update to the 2011 Transportation Master Plan. So that's the genesis for all of these directions to staff about looking at speed limits more closely. I think another thing that it seems to me is a common thread through all of these deliberations has been school zones. And I think there's probably some common ground and agreement that over the course of time, we really want to focus more on school safety, and sort of that's part of the whole suite of things that the teams outlined tonight. Perhaps, an alternate direction to staff would be to simply look at school zones over the next year. We could still report back. We could look at the findings, but that would be a start towards 30K in targeted areas. I think it would be best citywide. Staff have some concerns about looking ward by ward. Not to say that's not possible, but I think we'd throw that out to council this evening to consider an option to look at school zones as a starting point, with, again, the proviso as per the recommendations that we would report back to council on the results of the phasing.
Councillor Vasek? Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks for that. I have a very specific question. Thank you for finding that for us. And, okay, I can't because, okay. I guess my question is, so there also seems to be, that's the common ground, but there also seems to be concern about the delineation. So, I between the 30 on the school zone and then the surrounding area. So does it make any sense at all if you were looking just at the school zone in 30 to look at the walk to school, wherever the school transportation services Waterloo would say this is the 1 kilometer walk, to make those 40 and that 30 to see if the delineation helps? That might be making it way more complicated than necessary, and that might be the right solution. I'm trying to see if, you could do 30 school zones, connecting ones 40, and then the other cul-de-sacs and small ones 30 as well, if this were to fail, which obviously I hope it passes, but we're not looking that way, so.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. Excellent question, and I think what if council were to give staff some direction this evening, we'd come back with exactly that would look like with respect to school zone signages and some of the other discussions tonight about entrances and how we can do a 360-degree look around a school site. Yeah.
Does that help, Councillor Vasek, or do you have a follow-up? Okay. Any other comments or questions here? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mayor, I'm just wondering whether, like in the context of all of this, phase 2, as presented, is really about Ward 7. And I'm wondering whether we could scope this to Ward 7 to start, and whether that would actually help some of the other wards see the benefits of it.
Through you, Mayor McCabe.
Sorry, are you
Councillor Wright,
suggesting like a pilot project? Sorry, Commissioner, I just wanted to clarify this.
Basically a neighborhood area speed limit
But to
among
start
the
it as
neighborhoods in Ward 7.
but to start it as a pilot project, or just like fully implement that?
To fully implement that without doing the whole city.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. I think in essentially yes would be the answer. Staff's perspective would be it would be nice to have some consistency citywide, but that's not to say technically and legally it's not possible to do that. I think we'd probably still want to report back with a little bit more detail about that, how that would look. But in theory, yes, if we were to receive direction from council to start with a specific ward this evening, that would be possible.
Did you have a follow-up?
Just that I have a motion to support that.
Okay, thank you. We still are dealing with the motion that's on the table, but sorry, did you have? I thought Councillor Hamner, you had indicated. No, okay, all right. Any other comments or questions here then? Okay, well, we have the current recommendation and the motion moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Vasek on the table, which is option 2B. So I will call the vote. Can I have people who are in favor of option 2B? Okay, that's Councillor Wright, Bodley, Vasek, and myself. And those who are opposed to option 2B, Councillor Rowe, Roach, Councillor Hamner, and Councillor Freeman. So that, again, fails on a tie vote. So we will go to Councillor Wright. Had you, yeah, Councillor Wright has a proposal or has a motion here. I'll give you a second to read it and then look for, I assume that you're moving it, Councillor Wright, and I'll look for a seconder. Oh.
Through the mayor, we'll just need some clarity on if this is an amendment to the staff report. Is that an addition to, I would presume, the second bullet, the second recommendation? So the rest of the recommendation stands and this just becomes an addition to part 2. Would that be correct?
Does that make sense to you, Councillor Wright? Does that work for you, I mean, more? Like, is that what your intent was?
Yes, it was really to provide more time and flexibility for the discussion for the rest of the city.
Clerk?
So through the chair, just to be clear, this would not negate the recommendation that council approved in 2022. This just adds an element to it.
Okay.
So if council wanted, if it was the intent that this pause the rest of the implementation citywide to allow for this neighborhood specific first, then I think that's important to be clear about that.
Okay, so Councillor Wright, is that what you're intending with this?
That is what I would amend to this motion then.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Rowe?
Just through you, Mayor, just for clarity. So the rest of the city would still proceed at a later time. This is just one initial step, or is this a project to determine how it works in Ward 7 and then determine if it's going to be applied to the rest of the city?
I think we need to maybe pull the original well, the status
Yeah,
back up there.
Sorry, through the chair, I think that what we need to do is figure out if we are merging the report that council brought forward tonight, which still would implement 2B with the exception of Ward 7. So if we have to be clear on what is being voted on this evening, because council already has a decision from 2022 which implements certain speeds in certain class roads. This motion that has been now added only deals specifically with that neighborhood specific area. And so staff would then be stuck not knowing whether or not they're supposed to be proceeding with the rest of the other 6 wards in the city, specifically in certain areas. So I think that if we can just tighten this recommendation and be just a little bit clear so everyone is very clear what they're voting on this evening. If the intention is to pause any speed limit changes citywide until this neighborhood specific area has been revisited, or is the intention to proceed forward with the staff report, which would then start resigning neighborhoods with the exception of Ward 7. So I think that I'm not sure what the councillor is moving this evening, but staff would need that clarity. Because there's a council decision that already dictates, and then this was just the implementation plan, but there's a staff report this afternoon that then changes that a little bit, and then this motion would change it again, but only changes it for Ward 7.
Right, because
So it's what is the other 6 wards.
Because the decision that was made a year ago was to drop some of the speeds from 50 to 40. So that would still go ahead. I think, do we need to, and then this would be added to it. We're not going to, you don't intend to pause all the other work that was going to go ahead, do you? Was that your intent, Councillor Wright?
The first council decision, that would be the 40 that was originally proposed in 2022. Or is it 30 citywide as proposed?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Councillor Hammer.
I don't want to put words, thank you, Mayor, through you to Councillor Wright. I don't want to put words in your mouth. What I think I'm hearing you say is starting with Ward 7 from an implementation standpoint. And that's how I was interpreting your motion.
Yes,
that
that
correct?
is very much, that it proceed as a neighborhood level enhancement to the staff report 2B. But the presumption is that the rest of the city is on pause.
On pause. So I guess question then to the clerk, the motion that was part of the staff report tonight has been defeated, correct? So that's taking us back to the June 2022 motion, and which was directing staff to come up with an implementation plan. So I'm struggling a bit then, where do we put this?
Through the chair, that is correct, and I was trying to get a sense of, Councillor Wright, what your wish is, because you could simply, instead of tabling your amendment, retable the entire staff report with that change, because it is fairly substantial. But it just, perhaps if it's easier, if you want to articulate what your vision was for this motion, then we can perhaps craft it a little bit on the screen so that it's clear what everyone's voting on.
Do you want to respond, Councillor Wright? And then we'll go to Councillor Freeman, but do you want a minute to?
Yeah, it definitely needs a little work here in the moment. I mean, we're dealing with some fluctuating elements here.
Okay. Councillor Freeman?
Through you, Mayor McCabe. I think that staff have really heard a lot from council tonight, and they've seen the split vote on this, which, as previous councils have said, when we're in a split vote, it also means that we care about this issue very much and that we're trying to noodle through this. Maybe the better option is to give staff a week and to defer this and give them an opportunity to take back what they've heard and see whether or not they, because what I'm hearing, honestly, what I'm hearing is that there are 4 councillors in this city who would like 30 as their base speeds in their wards, and 4 councillors who have heard hands down that they want 40. Now, if staff want to go off, because I already asked a question about ward-specific limits back in September and was told that's no problem. And I appreciate the idea of getting it unified across the city, and I actually think that is a good thing to do, but I cannot ever vote for a base speed of 30, so that's going to leave me out on anything. And I have a sense that maybe we're going to continue to be split down this line. And I just think that our brain power around this might not be as useful as allowing staff to spend some time thinking about this. And you know, maybe the pilot idea is a great one, and it'll give staff also a chance to circle back with our partners on this. So EMS, fire, Grand River Transit, all of those pieces. And I also think it gives an opportunity for the community to see how important this issue is to us, because we are split down the middle on this. So that's my suggestion. I'm happy to put a deferral motion on the table for all of us. I do think we've had really good conversation around this tonight. And so that's my suggestion. It can be 1 week, 2 weeks. I'm not talking about deferring for 6 months or something like that. That's not my intention here. It's still to allow us to have a plan forward when the weather changes in the spring. But that's my suggestion. I don't know if there's anyone who's willing to second a deferral. Yeah.
Before we go to the seconder piece, I don't know if if Commissioner Ormston, you want to respond, but I would before I give you the microphone, I would just say, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Freeman, but I think I wasn't part of past council, but I think deferring it is going to be very frustrating, I think, for me, because, and I don't want to put words in staff's mouth, but this is an issue that previous council has talked about for 2 or 3 years, and I think we know. I mean, staff has done a lot of due diligence. They've done a lot of really good work for 2 or 3 years. They put together another excellent report. They've given us, a few of their, like from the previous one, and then today, their recommendations. So I feel like we're going to do a disservice to ourselves and to the community and to staff if we ask for if we defer this. I think yes, we have a split vote, but I have heard people also say that, they see that the direction is going towards 30. So I don't know, maybe it's not as, 4 and 4 against. I mean, if some councillors around this horseshoe have just said that not too long ago, that they see that the direction is eventually to 30. So it, I take them at their word for that. So I'll stop there, I guess, and let Commissioner Ormston try to help us. I don't know if it's noodle or muddle our way through, but but yeah, I would hope that we don't defer this.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor McCabe, and your remarks are right on here. Just getting back to procedure, and I thank Julie for being careful with this tonight, because we want to get this right. And if I look back at the original recommendation that was there, essentially what is before council this evening is the revised implementation plan. So that's what Jenny's report speaks to. So if council do not approve that report tonight, to me that satisfies the previous direction that we got from council, and we can essentially start again. And based on what my understanding is this evening, that would look like another attempt at an implementation plan that would speak towards specific options that council could then consider. And staff would certainly be prepared to go back and look at that and revise it. There's been a lot of work that's been already done that can be incorporated into that, so the effort should be relatively straightforward, although it will take a little bit of time, and I don't want to pin the team down to an exact time tonight, but that to me would be an option to give council more latitude in adopting an implementation plan if it wanted, that would address some of the nuances that we've heard tonight.
Councillor Vasek. Thank you, Commissioner Ormston.
Okay, these are preliminary thoughts without a lot of background questions. And if some of you don't know, I have several background questions every week for staff. So forgive me if these aren't good ideas. Councillor Wright, can I just see if this is what maybe you are thinking, because I want to understand that, because for some reason that feels important to me. Was the suggestion phase 1, 30 kilometers in school zones, phase 2, Ward 7, phase 3 and 4, the rest of the city, so 2B for Uptown, and then the revised, Councillor Freeman's revised version for the rest of the city, with the option to go to 30 should the results from Uptown look good?
Yes.
Okay. That sounds like a reasonable option, because I think in general, urban areas, there's generally more buy-in to that, so people would have a good sense that if they came to a downtown, uptown, but a downtown, that they may encounter some 30-kilometer streets. So that leaves it open for the rest of the city to consider 30, should that make sense? And if we still have an impasse at the rest of the city would still be lower at 40, but it would reduce potentially confusion, if there would be any confusion, because downtowns may be more likely everywhere to be 30. So I'm just going to say that I think I like that option. I do not like the ward-specific option, and the reason why is because I don't think that I don't think that is a solid. I don't think that's a policy based on public input and research and any sort of objectivity. I think that it is based more on our individual fears about what our constituents might say. I think it would be chaotic and potentially lead to more confusion. I rather have more consistency, at least from my understandings of the report, and I could be wrong. So maybe, Commissioner Ormson is saying that's an option, but I do have concerns about that. So is that a concern? It feels like an individual decision to make rather than a policy decision based on sound evidence. So yeah, those are my thoughts. If you have thoughts or perspectives, I don't have a specific question.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasic. So this is a lot to digest for sure, but the first thing that strikes me or comes to my mind is staff still has to come back with a report, with a recommendation. And now what I'm hearing is being asked is to come back with a report by ward, or one all-encompassing report with a recommendation for each ward. I'm starting to get a little bit confused. So staff will always have a recommendation, and we're prepared to come back with a report on an implementation plan. But again, I want to stress the importance of consistency across the city. And so.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to ask a procedure question to the clerk. Go ahead. So my question, clerk, Julie, I'm not sure what to call you in this exactly, but so what I'm hearing, I think what I'm hearing is that we want to do the phase 1, which is what Councillor Vasic was saying, start phase 1 in the school zones and uptown. So do we need to, could we not create another motion right now that will kind of incorporate what Councillor Wright has here in terms of starting with Ward 7, but then also indicates that phase 1 would essentially be school zones, Ward 7. I'm looking around to see if that works for people. And then moving into the phase 2 would be reducing speeds across this, across on the minor and major collectors to 40 rather than 30. I don't know, I'm trying to thread the needle here, right? Pardon? Sorry, okay. Councillor Vasek.
Can I ask a follow-up about this ward specific? So my hunch that I mentioned before to Councillor Wright is that maybe there would be more buy-in and less confusion if there were 30 in an uptown/downtown core and the remainder are at 40. Do you think that might be possibly true because it's a more urban area, or maybe not? It's still kind of chaotic because it's ward by ward.
Councillor Ormston looks like he wants to take that one.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor McCabe, and thanks again for your questions, Councillor Vasek. I think, as per my previous remarks, staff would want to take this away. It's very difficult to provide what I would say an accurate and meaningful alternate resolution this evening without all of the information that the team needs to look at before they can actually do that with some confidence so that council know what they're approving. So in the spirit of Councillor Freeman's remarks, if we could take this away, and what I mean is take this away with some direction on what to look at, we'd be happy to return.
Thank you, Commissioner Ormston. Councillor Hamner, I apologize, I missed you.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to make a comment about the ward-specific approach. I think we would lose, I agree with Councillor Vasek, I think we would lose a lot of the consistency that we need to get and consistency with our neighboring cities. So not so sure that that's the right direction to go. Ward 7 going first and testing it out, and it's got different characteristics than some of the other areas, maybe an appropriate first step as well.
Thank you, Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Mayor McCabe. First, I just want to apologize to staff. My first inclination was that the original staff report to be already suggested school zones, Ward 2 and Ward 7, as the first places to go. The challenge that I think I have would be if we were to do it in Ward 2 and Ward 7, which I would be supportive of, I think we're already casting the die for the rest of the community based on what I'm hearing with respect to wanting consistency across the city. And I agree with that. I think the problem is, I think if we were to have Ward 7 and perhaps Ward 2, but if we were to have Ward 7 go first, we're not going to get any information, I suspect, based on what I'm hearing around the horseshoe that's going to change people's minds. We're gridlocked is where I would classify it. And so the thing that the only thing that we could wordsmith something, we could defer it, what have you. I'm fine. The thing that I'm less clear on is the commentary around the previous council decision. So the previous council decision was come back with go to 30 with a revised implementation plan. And that passed. We're here today. You've provided us with a revised implementation plan to go to 30. That is the piece that is not being approved. But it sounds like the reason it's not being approved is because there's a desire to perhaps reconsider that original motion. And I don't want to speak for the other three folks who voted in favor with me. I don't think we have a desire to reconsider. Those three folks have a desire to reconsider that motion. So my question is, you could keep coming back with revised implementation plans that we never approve, which is what the previous council asked, or I guess my question is, what happens now if you never come back with a revised implementation plan that council approves?
Commissioner Ormston, do you want to take that? Or I don't know if...
Through you, Mayor McCabe, excellent question, Councillor Bali. I would say that things remain status quo until such time as we receive direction from council to revise the speed limits across the city.
Do you have a follow-up? Okay, Councillor Roach.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just to help me out, being new here. So if both motions are failed, we go back to the decision of a previous council. But I thought I'm not a political scientist, but I thought I read somewhere that one council cannot bind a future council.
That's correct, yes. So, yeah, that is correct. And do you want to respond to that, Clerk?
Through the chair to Councillor Roach, that is correct. So you don't require a reconsideration motion. I think that the nuance that Commissioner Ormston was just speaking to is the fact that while there was a direction to implement a 30K, the implementation plan itself is yet to be approved. So the streets would remain signed as approved. And so there would be no further implementation work done subject to any additional direction. And before council this evening, you have a staff report with a revised option, which you're free to consider regardless of how the vote was conducted in 2022, because it is a new council, and a reconsideration motion could never be successful because you do have 50% new council. So I wouldn't worry about the procedural elements of whether or not you can make a change decision this evening. That's not at issue. I think what is at issue is to be clear what would happen tomorrow. And I think maybe that's the easiest way to think about it is what happens tomorrow if none of these motions this evening are successful. What happens tomorrow is on the books, there's a direction to staff to implement an option and to come back with an implementation plan. So until there's an approved implementation plan, no signage changes.
Does that help, Councillor? Or do you have a
No
follow-up?
bylaw changes, more importantly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Through you to Rook, could you please put up the other, or Julie, the other motion? So if I'm understanding what you've done here, it's taking the staff report and adding in Councillor Wright's amendment, which has the recommendations from the staff on how we implement the reduced speed limits on the roads that they've defined, which have some as class 4 and class 5, so graduated of the, thank you, that's better. So it's got the 30 kilometers in school zones, the 40 kilometers on class 4, and minor roads, and 50 on major collector roads, which is what was the modification. I like the addition of Councillor Wright's amendment into this motion and could support it if it's this way.
Thank you, Councillor Hamner. Yeah, Councillor Bodley. What? Oh, sorry, Tim.
Oh, thanks, Mayor McCabe. And a really good discussion. It is a difficult decision ultimately for council. I think we're headed around the right path here, though, in really thinking about the direction to staff. As Commissioner Ormston noted, when we leave today, having clarity will be really, really important for us. And Councillor Wright has introduced a new concept, and my suggestion is if you can give us like a 15-minute recess to kind of get that wording exact so that we can kind of articulate back what we think we're hearing from Councillor Wright into this motion. That would help us. We'd also prepare kind of that alternate motion, should that one fail, to just deal with the school zones this evening as well. So council could have a little bit of a path forward and where we would go next with the balance of the city. So
Okay,
suggesting a 15-minute recess.
Thank you very much. Do you want to
just
make your comment and then we'll take a 15-minute break?
Before we do that, if I could, so just for clarity, this motion that's before us would be directing staff to go to 40 kilometers an hour everywhere in the city except uptown and school zones. So it's Councillor Freeman's motion, but saying Ward 7 is separate and distinct. It can go to 30. Everyone else has to go to 40. but only uptown and not the rest of the city. Nothing else is coming back to council. It's just uptown. That's what this motion is, right?
Sorry, that's what staff just asked, if they could step away for 15 minutes to do some wordsmithing on this to make sure that, and then they'll bring it back. But yeah, that is the, I'd look to Councillor Wright, but I think that is the vision, yeah. Yeah. Councillor Vasek.
Okay. So that aside, that's something for us to consider. This is another thought I have, though. Because now I'm really not sure what the right decision is. Sorry. I took a candy not thinking I had anything to say. It sounds like staff aren't entirely sure if having a different ward is a good idea, a different option in one ward is a good idea. So 2B in Uptown, Councillor Freeman's revised motion citywide. So when you go away for your recess, can you also, not just wordsmith, but would you be able to provide any additional commentary on if that's just another ward-specific move? It's different, but if you have any of the same concerns about that? Because if there are concerns about that, then I do have some hesitations about that motion.
If I may, Councillor Vasek, I was just saying, when staff brings us back, we can ask those questions, or you can ask those questions. Does that sound fair? Okay, can we take a 15-minute break? And thank you, Tim, thank you, staff, for that, and we'll take a 15-minute recess.
We're good with the time. They went
So-
overboard, no issue.
We went a little over 15, yeah.
Welcome back, staff. Thank you and thank you to our viewing public for waiting for the break that we just had. Hopefully, people had time to go out and shovel their sidewalks or something like that while we were waiting. Little PSA. Okay, it looks like, thank you, staff, for going back, for taking this away and thinking about this again. We really appreciate it. And so the clerk is pulling up a revised motion. And Julie, should I turn it over to you or to Tim? To Julie to speak to it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, to Councillor Wright, to confirm that we've articulated correctly on the screen a proposed motion. I'm just going to zoom in because there was also another alternate that was discussed. But we think we've articulated clearly. So this is a blend of the staff report and Councillor Freeman's motion and then Councillor Wright's amendment, which effectively implements in wards 1 to 6, if approved by council, a speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour in all school zones, 40 on class 4 minor collector, 50 on class 4 major collector, and 40 kilometers on class 5 local roads. So wards 1 to 6, local roads would be 40, school zones 30, the minor collector 40, and the major collector 50. But then within Ward 7, there'd be a specific Ward 7 speed limit plan, which would be 30 kilometers in all school zones and class 5 local, 40 kilometer on the minor, 50 kilometer on the major collector, with some specific potential. That would be part of the implementation plan. Council would direct staff to implement a revised implementation plan beginning this spring, which would, looking at the staff report, just to be clear for everyone, would mean an implementation plan beginning in the school zones in Ward 2 and 7. And traffic bylaw amendments would be brought forward to enable this. And I'm just going to look to Commissioner Ormston to make sure that I've captured that correctly.
Through Mayor McCabe to the clerk. Yes, that's correct, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you again, Commissioner Ormston and Clerk. Can I confirm with you, Councillor Wright, if this counts?
Yes, this is an accurate representation of what I would like to move.
Okay. And yeah, so I know Councillor Vasek, I'll pick it back up with you and then go, or do you have? Right. No, but she had started with a question about the ward specific thing. So I thought we could pick it back up with that question and then I'll go to you. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I thought you, but it, before we broke, we said just to hold your question about your concerns. You were saying you might have had concerns about the ward specific piece. Did you want to ask a question about that? Right, sorry. So moved by Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Vasek.
Yeah, so same question. Is this a ward-specific motion that would be chaotic, or does this make sense given it's an urban area?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasek. Given all the conversation that's occurred tonight, yeah, this is ward specific, but it creates some consistency between wards 1 and 6. With Ward 7 being different, staff are a little bit concerned about that, but it is what it is. That's what council is recommending tonight as part of this motion.
Can I ask a follow-up then? What are the concerns?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasic. The concerns are consistency. Obviously, staff from a citywide perspective, we're in favor of a consistent approach across the city. When it's inconsistent, that leads to questions from the public. Seeing the inconsistent approach to speed limits, but with wards 1 and 6, the majority of the city being consistent, that's a good compromise.
Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Through you to the clerk. Julie, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly when you were saying the implementation. Is it only the schools in Ward 7 and 2, or all of the schools and Wards 2 and 7 as the first phase?
Apologies to the chair, to Councillor Hanmer. It would be all of the schools and then the other remaining classification of roads in Ward 2 and 7 to begin. Perfect. So to be clear, all the school zones 30 implementation would start this spring, and within Ward 7, the local roads implementation would start with the 30. The minor and the major would start with the 40 and 50, and then within Ward 2, it would be the school zones with the 30, and it would be 40 on the minor, 50 on the major, and 40 on the local roads.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodley.
Just my comments, I guess. So, while I appreciate that this gets us in a little bit further down the road, pardon the pun, I won't be able to support this in strictly from the perspective of the fact that it would be not implementing 30 kilometers in Ward 2, where I heard loud and clear during the election that was something that was supported by my residents, by my constituents. And while I appreciate the commentary from staff about trying to break the gridlock by having this motion, I appreciate that and I understand that. I do also appreciate that Ward 7 has some context sensitivity, the amount of density, the sort of traditional historic grid design that's in the ward. There's a lot of people who walk in Ward 6 in the University District. There's a heavy amount of pedestrian deaths are in that area, not necessarily on these roads that we would be signing through here, but on University. And quite frankly, I hear every day in Ward 2 about streets that people are driving way too damn fast, and this doesn't address it from my perspective. So I won't be supporting it, but I do appreciate all of the hard work that staff have put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we will call the vote on this. So those in favor of the proposed alternative motion moved by Councillor Wright and seconded by Councillor Vasic. I'm not going to read the whole thing unless someone wants me to. So those in favor, we have Councillor Freeman, Councillor Wright, Councillor Vasic, Councillor Rowe, Councillor Hamner in favor, and those opposed, Councillor Roach and Councillor Bodley. That is passed. Thank you, staff, for your last-minute wordsmithing, and thank you, Council, and our delegate, Jason Thistlethwaite, and Jenny and Bob for your work on this. And for hanging with us tonight. And I just wanted to also say thanks very much to Councillor Roach, it's the R's. Royce, Roach, and Rowe is really confusing me tonight. I apologize. I just wanted to say thank you to Councillor Bodley, because I wasn't on council when he started this journey, but I think it's something that you put forward because you really believe that it's the right way to go, it's the right direction, and you stuck with it, and you've moved the conversation quite a bit further, I think, than certainly in lots of other communities. So I think that's it's not perfection, but it is progress. So I hope you take heart with that, and know that staff are going to take this away. We're going to look for other ways to. It's one piece of the puzzle, as we were saying earlier, of the road safety program, to increase the safety in our community. And I hope that you're if not fully. It's not exactly where you want it to be. Just know that you really moved the yardsticks on this one. So thank you very much. And you had some comments?
Yeah, if I can, if you don't mind, Mayor McCabe. I just wanted to say, first of all, I really do want to say thank you to staff for all of the hard work and trying to navigate through a really difficult conversation, and to Mr. Thistlethwaite for coming through here and staying to listen to all of that. Yeah, disappointed. I am personally, yes, disappointed. I'm also disappointed for the community members who fought for this with me. But that said, just like last time, I continue to have faith in our council. I believe that everybody here around the Horseshoe individually voted with what they felt was in the best interest of the community. I truly believe that. I believe that this council cares about traffic safety, that we will not hesitate to support initiatives that slow down cars in our neighborhood, and that we will invest in the safety of our community. And as I said, as Mayor McCabe said, while this doesn't get us fully in the direction that I had sort of envisioned or that previous council had envisioned, it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I just wanted to thank council for the thoughtful discussion and deliberation on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we now have our delegate, Patty Brady, resident of Waterloo, who is here to address us he's one of our students from Wilfrid Laurier, and he's here to do a course presentation, I understand it. So thank you for your patience. But I think if I don't want to put words in your mouth or on your essay or whatever it is, but this has probably hopefully this has been instructive for you as to how local councils do some of their work along with staff and members of the community. So welcome, Patty. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council, public, staff. I am a student at Wilfrid Laurier. I am practicing and studying political science. I am also just a concerned citizen tonight. I have, over the past 3 years of living in the Waterloo area, and specifically Ward 7, noticed that the bike lanes, the sidewalks, as well as trail maintenance is not to the standard that both the province provides or the municipal government, in all the research I've done, say they do provide. I do believe they need to go, the municipal government does need to go past what the province asks for winter maintenance either way. I find sidewalk, bike lane, and trail maintenance to be dangerous, inconsistent, and unsustainable within the city. In Waterloo specifically, there are many walking and biking commuters, including myself, who in the winter months are being placed in dangerous situations based on this neglect. I'll start with bike lanes. The province has stated that within 48 hours, with specific amounts of snow falling, there needs to be clearance that is only specific to 5 centimeters of snow accruement, I should say. And this does not take into account the plowing that may occur that may block bike lanes. It also doesn't account specifically to any ice that builds up. It does mention ice buildup, but it doesn't mention specifically how quickly or to the amount of precipitation. I find that on the city website it says, and I quote, "usually completed after 48 hours after snow has stopped falling." I think that usually 48 hours is something that makes it so that bike travel within the city might, throughout the winter months for commuters or just someone recreationally biking, could be dangerous. I think that it allows someone that wants to plan to bike or plan to take a sustainable method of travel. It makes their commute harder. It makes their lives harder. And I think that the city needs to go beyond the provincial standard, which is outlined in a tier system based on accrual of snowfall. It needs to go beyond that and provide a more clear a more clear policy on how to clear bike lanes. For sidewalk clearing, there's a completely separate reason why it's an issue. It's problematic because there is, again, it's inconsistency, but it's inconsistency in the sense that some sidewalks are to be cleared by the city. Of course, those areas that don't, as many staff might know, the areas that are public buildings, parks, or areas that just do not have a private institution that goes along them. Through looking at city maps, it shows that there's like small portions or trails, of course. So because in Waterloo, the amount of rental properties and student housing is very hard, because the amount of rental properties and student housing is greater than in other cities, lots of residential property owners don't see to the clearing of their sidewalks or walkways. That is why I would have initially proposed to council that the city clears all sidewalks, as this would create less data discrepancy and confusion. It would place less of a burden on those who may not be able to tend to their sidewalks for any number of reasons, including busyness, amount of properties owned, disability, being away from home or business, etc. It would also allow for proper techniques and standards outlined by the city and by the province to be met, as it would be a city worker that is doing their job, rather than a private business or homeowner who does not know or is not familiar with the municipal or provincial standard. It would also allow for government buildings, parks, businesses, and residents alike to be frequented by people within the city at all times, or within 24 hours or 48 hours, depending on the amount of snowfall. I believe that it should work on a prioritized system, so areas like retirement homes, schools, both public and private, transit and or transit stations and bus stops. Those areas should be targeted first for snow removal. And I believe that if this city-wide or city-responsible plowing is too burdensome for the city at this time, that there be stricter enforcement and penalties for the owners of buildings, businesses or residential buildings who do not abide to the current provincial or municipal standards for sidewalk clearing. And I believe that those could be enforced by allowing for inspectors of the city to be more available to the public, or just to be on patrol, or that responsibility could be given to those who are already plowing. A bylaw officer, the responsibility could be given to those who are plowing. Finally, I ask for sustainable practices when it comes to the maintenance of sidewalks and trails. The city of Waterloo currently operates under the Smart About Salt system, as is outlined on your website. These guidelines, however, only pertain to the reduction of salt use and not to the use of sustainable salt alternatives. I understand that sustainable salt alternatives are more expensive, and municipal government doesn't always like that. So I propose that pet-friendly salt alternatives are to be used by the city, where areas are most prone for dog walkers, such as trails in Waterloo Park, or trails such as the Iron Trail. And I have come today again with much to say on winter maintenance. I am a professional by no means. I've done limited research and don't have too many answers to any questions that may be asked tonight. But I do ask that you look for more effective and sustainable ways to make a more walk, bike, and transit-friendly city in Waterloo. And if you do have any questions, which I, again, may or may not be able to answer, please fire away.
Thank you very much, Patty. I appreciate your presentation and the information you provided. Do we have any questions for him? Yep, Councillor Hamner.
Actually, through you, Mayor, not really a question, but Patty, thank you. Just a comment. You may not have a lot of answers for things, but you did give us food for thought, and you very well articulated pros and cons for the things that you were suggesting. So thank you for raising that and bringing that to us.
Again, I don't know much jargon here, but through you, Mayor, to Councillor
Hamner. After waiting and listening for 3 hours, he's learned the
Exactly, yeah.
system. Good for you, Patty.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I had the line of sight to Councillor Hamner's nameplate wasn't so great. So through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hamner, thank you very much.
Councillor Vasic.
Well done. And I don't want you to leave without having been asked a question because it's a part of an assignment. So I just wanted to know if you did know at all that we had a conversation about sidewalk snow clearing at our budget meeting. You do know. So, and I don't know if you have any interest. That was my question. If you have any interest beyond just your presentation, but there will be public consultation as part of that review. And so you can either check out engagewr.ca, where that will likely go, or if you have more interest, I don't know if you're already connected with staff through Commissioner Dykstra, but maybe if you wanted to, we could forward your email on, so when there's more targeted engagement, like with the people who delegated at the end of January, city staff could reach out to you. So no need to respond to that question now, but if you have interest in that,
of course, yeah,
you can let the clerks or us know.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Vasic. Councillor Wright.
Through you, Chair. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm your ward councillor.
Hello.
My email is julie.wright@waterloo.ca. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you through Mayor McCabe to Mr. Brady. For whatever it's worth, and I don't know if this is actually allowed or not, but I think after sitting through that conversation for a couple of hours, I think you should definitely let your teacher know that you deserve an A on this project. And if she wants like an endorsement from maybe just me individually, yeah, that'd be great. You can let her know.
Right. I'll connect you guys for sure. Yeah. I'll have my people talk to her people to talk to your people.
Yeah, she can watch the YouTube video, the last 10 minutes of it, and
I won't put her through that. But thank you.
I just said the last 10 minutes. It doesn't have to watch the entire.
She is a city councillor for the city of Kitchener. So she also understands the pains and struggles of regional council, and yeah. So.
Pains and struggles. This is the fun stuff. Sorry. This is the fun stuff, Patty.
The excitement, I should say. Yes.
Yeah, I also just wanted to make sure you knew about the sidewalk consultations, and just I don't want to put Councillor Rowe on the spot, but are there times where either Councillor Wright or you are going into Laurier for like? I just thought maybe you might want to mention that to him. I don't know what the dates and times are.
Through you, Mayor. There is not a date at the moment. There are municipal mornings with the Student Association where Councillor Wright and I will be attending to speak to students. So if you connect with them, then they can let you know the dates, and we're there, and certainly reach out at any time.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you very much.
So yeah, thank you very much. I don't have a question for you except to say thank you for coming in. I hope you do well on your assignment, and I hope I don't know if you're from Waterloo originally, but we love it when students come to Waterloo and stay in Waterloo. That's a story of a lot of us here, including myself. So thank you, and yeah, keep tabs on what we're doing here.
As a proud Bellevillian, I'll have to consider it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patty. Okay, so that brings us to that's our last delegation. There was 2 delegates that were not able to come, and we've circulated. Thank you, Julie, for circulating their presentation to council for our information. So moving on in the agenda. There's no further consideration of notice of motions given at previous meetings, no existing notice of motions, no additional communications or correspondence, no unfinished business. Any additional questions? Any that anyone has from council? Any new business, council? No, I'll just quickly add that I wanted to thank, last week, there's a police, I don't know what his title is in the Waterloo Region Police Services, Mike Nagy is his name, I think he might be a detective, was the tournament organizer. He organized a tournament that was held on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at Rim Park. 100 teams of police officers from, I believe it's called International Hockey Tournament, but I think they're from across Ontario, raised, 100 teams, 1,200 hockey players, a tremendous amount of volunteers raising money for Kids Ability and also Scotland's Yard. And they invited Ron McLean to our community, who was here as well and gave us a shout out and gave Mike a shout out on Hockey Night in Canada, which was wonderful. And so I just wanted to thank Mike for all the work that he put into that. I'm sure it was a tremendous amount of organizational work to pull that off, and thank him and the teams that came from across Ontario to raise money for a couple of really amazing charities in our community. And the second thing I wanted to mention is congratulations to the KW Siskins, Waterloo's Junior B hockey club that clinched the Midwestern Conference championship yesterday at the end of regular season. So they are on their way to, in the playoffs start. I'm not sure when the playoffs start. You can check it out at the siskins.ca, kwsiskins.ca, and follow their playoff journey towards the Cherry Cup. So congratulations to them. Maybe they'll win it again. So if there's, so the final agenda item here, well, second last agenda item is the enactment of bylaws. Who would like to, I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Freeman, moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Rowe. All in favor? That is unanimous. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Vasek, and moved by Councillor Vasek and seconded by Councillor Roach. So that, all in favor? That is the end of council tonight. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff.